Welcome in, everyone, to the latest episode of the podcast. I am Nathan Marzion, joined as always by my good friend Brandon Eckel. And Brandon, we have lots to talk about. It is late January in the NBA season, so naturally there's trade deadline stuff being talked about. The season's ramping up, all-star stuff. But no, we are talking about the firing of the Bucks head coach in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
Adrian Griffin gone after 43 games, a 30-13 record. It just shocking, dude. I could not believe it when I saw the news. People had talked about it, people had complained about, they should fire Griffin. And I was always like, they're not going to fire the dude in his first year, halfway through the season. Like, I just did not see it as a possibility. Even if it wasn't going well, I'm like, they're going to let him have this season. If he loses in the playoffs, then sure, they'll move on from him. But I did not see them moving away from him in the middle of the year, but they did. What were your thoughts? How shocked were you? Just give me your, initial take on the thing.
Yeah, I was shocked. Same. I mean, well, I know we were texting right away because it was like you said. We'd all talked about how he didn't look like he was ready to be a head coach, or at least I thought. And I think you and I agreed. Um, and like you said, didn't expect it to happen during the season, first season. I didn't think they had the guts to do it, kind of. But to me, it actually is like more exciting because it shows how serious they are about like this team championship aspirations. And they know that, having a coach in there makes a difference. And obviously I know we're going to get to talking about Doc and how we feel about that. But, obviously that's a big step from somebody who's never been a head coach, and whatever was going on wasn't working. Players already seemed like they weren't bought in anymore, after 4 or 5 months. So yeah, I was very shocked that they actually did it, but it was something that needed to happen, I think.
Yeah, the vibes were definitely not the best. I mean, I didn't think they were terrible. Like you found out that okay, it was way worse than you thought, and the guys were kind of out on him, and clearly they didn't like him if they were willing to move on from him halfway through the season. But
Mm,
I mean, again, I just that day, that morning, if you had asked me like, how do you feel? I would have been like, I think they can turn this around. I think that there's a chance they can get this thing headed in the right direction. They need to make a trade, but I was not like, oh my God, this team is doomed unless they fire the coach. And so yeah, it was completely shocking. And I never was like, oh my God, I think Griffin's a great coach or anything. He clearly had his struggles. He clearly did seem a little bit in over his head, but I was holding out some hope. And again, this was mainly because I didn't think there was any chance they were going to fire the guy. So I'm like, you might as well just be a little bit positive, hold out some hope that maybe they can turn this around. If they don't, they don't, then you'll fire him. But um, you know, I was holding out some hope, and no, they pulled the plug. And like you said, it does show their level of commitment and their standard that like they are not afraid to, just change things at the drop of a hat to
mhm.
make sure that they are doing everything they can to win a title right now, which is what you have to do. This is how you have to treat a team like this when you have these star players, when you have a guy like Giannis in his prime. You can't afford to be, if they looked at it and said, we think Doc Rivers would be a better coach for this team, like there's no sense waiting and taking the time to like see and make sure. It's like, no, if you really believe it and the guys aren't in on it, you got to go make that change, and they did. So yeah, I mean, pretty remarkable. I want to ask you about, and I know we disagree on this a little bit,
Mm,
the whole Giannis aspect of this whole thing.
mhm.
So obviously Giannis was probably the primary reason why they ended up hiring Adrian Griffin. I would assume that that's the case. But how does this make you feel about, letting Giannis not make some decisions? Because again, I don't think he made the decision. I think that, and I mean, I don't remember if we agree on this or not, but in my opinion, they had a few guys at the end of the line that they had kind of agreed to as an organization. And then they went to
Mhm.
Giannis and said, Giannis met with the guys, or Giannis talked to some guys, and they were like, which of these guys do you like? Which don't you like? And at that point, I think Giannis kind of gave his 2 cents, said, I don't like Nick Nurse. I do like Griffin, blah, blah, blah. And that was kind of the deciding factor for them. I don't think this was just Giannis overriding everyone else and them going against their entire beliefs to say, no, we're just going to listen to Giannis. But they obviously, asked him about it. He gave his 2 cents and ended up hiring a coach as a result of that. Does this make you change your, process of doing these types of things? Are they? Would you
Hmm.
not be considering Giannis's opinion as much, or do you think, like in my opinion, the only thing they did wrong was have Griffin in that final three. They clearly, they got him to the final three.
Yeah.
That was a mistake because he was not ready to be a head coach for this Milwaukee Bucks team. Like that's a mistake to have him in your final three. When he's in the final three and you have Giannis meet with these guys and then ask Giannis's opinion, you're just giving the chance for Giannis to pick this guy, and they basically made the wrong call on him from the beginning. I don't really blame Giannis for having an opinion, having a guy he likes and a guy he doesn't like. I don't necessarily blame them for you know believe or going with Giannis's choice because you have to listen to your star player. I'm just the problem was that they liked Griffin enough to have him in their final three, and that's my take on it. But I think you have
Yeah.
a little bit of a different take because I know you're a little bit more like against the whole player picking the coach type of thing.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because, the one thing where I totally agree with you, and I know that when we were, kind of talking back and forth, some of it came off differently, but at the end of the day, it's Giannis, and he's going to have an input. And now, we saw his quote today that you sent, to us. When he's talking about like, oh, I just go out there play, like it's not up to me. That's the part where I have issues with him saying that. And I know this wasn't just him decision. It's hard for me to like believe one side or the other when he's saying that, but then it's like, oh, I don't want Nurse as a coach. If you really don't care, then why do you have such a strong opinion? However, I say that he might just not like him as a person, and he might be like, "Nah, I don't, he's not somebody I want to play for." And you know what? I think you have to kind of take that and say, "This is the guy that brought us the championship, changed our franchise. He's our cornerstone, and we have to listen to him." But I actually like your point a lot that we hadn't talked about before. Of they shouldn't have had Griffin in the final three probably in the first place. And that was my gripe with him was why do we have a first time coach as somebody that a leading front runner to get the job. You know, Nick Nurse, they talked to Kenny Atkinson, James Borrego, um, from Charlotte, multiple other guys. I don't know, maybe Nick McMillan, and obviously even they talked about Doc back in the summer too. So it's just one of those things where, like you said, you kind of put it there. And if Giannis gets kind of buddy buddy, and not just Giannis, Chris, front office gets buddy buddy with him, and they kind of like, yeah, he's a first time coach. He could bring something new. I like this. I like this. Like next thing you know, boom, he's the leader in the clubhouse to get the job. So I do think you have to value the opinion. I think you have to hear him out, but I also don't like the whole, you know, if we're gonna say we're going based on what the player said, fine. But then let's be honest. Let's not say, oh, I don't care who we play for, this and that. And I'm sure Chris would have said the same thing. I'm sure Brooke would have said the same thing. But obviously they do care, especially giving up on a coach 4 or 5 months in. But also to your point when we talked, I'd rather have them say, hey, you know what? We made a mistake. We made the wrong call. We had the wrong feeling on this guy. He's not ready to be a coach. And they moved on. That takes guts. It's a tough decision to make. And I'm glad they did it. But, obviously looking back, you just wish that it would have been different going into this season.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like I don't think there's a problem with if Giannis is, as I said, I don't think there's a problem if Giannis doesn't like Nurse, but I think that you've got to have two at that point. If you're in your final three, you've got to have two really reliable, good backups
Hmm.
that you're like, okay, if Giannis picks one of these guys, we're still really good with him. And again, that they might have thought that about Griff, but if that's the case, they were obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Um, it's like the backup should have been a better, more proven guy, and then you'd be in a better spot. But it's like they kind of, again, they made a mistake having this guy that far into their pool. But yeah, I mean, again, it's a credit to Horace. I know again they made a mistake hiring him to begin with, so I guess we're crediting him for fixing his own mistake. But
Yeah.
that is something you can credit him for. There are a lot of GMs that would be, too they'd have too much pride and too much, they just would not be able to admit their mistake and just kind of bite the bullet like John
Yeah.
Horst did. And he's done this several times throughout his tenure here. And it's something that has made him a really good GM is the aggressiveness, not being complacent, being able to admit your mistakes, being able to move on from guys, and not get ever just comfortable. And it's one of the things that got this team a title, trading for Drew Holiday. And then, they trade for Damian Lillard. They make the PJ Tucker move. They like all this stuff they've done where they just were not comfortable being just good, not comfortable being in a pretty good spot. It was like, no, we want to get better. We want to do this. We want to do that. We want to take the next step and the next step. That's a credit to John Horst, because again, there's been so many times where they could have just remained comfortable and said, we're good. We don't need to shake things up too much, but they have, and credit to him. Let's talk a little bit about Doc Rivers now. So Griffin gets fired, and immediately it comes out that Rivers is kind of the top guy to replace him. And my initial thought is like, come on, this is not ideal, because you're basically going back to a Bud Light coach. And look, Bud's a good coach. I think in general, or at least at a base level, like Doc Rivers is an okay coach. But the entire reason you got rid of Bud was because he didn't get it done in the playoffs. He wasn't a playoff coach. He was an 82 game coach, not a 16 game coach. And if you're talking about guys that are not playoff coaches, Doc Rivers is at the top of that list based on his last, 10 to 12 years as a coach in this league. So, my initial thought is just like, man, like we are going back to the guy that is, the exact reason, his weaknesses are the exact reason we fired Mike Budenholzer to begin with, and now we're going back to a guy just like that. So my initial thought was, I don't like it. Then you read about the stuff that he's kind of been secretly, a consultant in this whole thing, and he's kind of been with the team a little bit, or working with guys a little bit. So there's some of that makes you say, okay, maybe he's, of the candidates out there, he's probably the best. That's the other thing, is you take a step back and say, well, who else was really available? It sounded like Kenny Atkinson might have been available. If that was the case, I'd rather have him. But I mean, I'm not going to say he's that much better. And there wasn't that many guys that you're like, that's the guy, go get him. And so you're kind of left saying, okay, well, Doc is experienced. He does provide some stability. He's going to run the pick and roll more often. We're probably going to be smoother on offense, a little bit better on defense in the regular season. Really, the big thing is you're just like, I just don't trust him come playoff time. I don't think he's going to make the right adjustments. I don't think he's a playoff coach. But I mean, again, I've had a couple days to think on it, and it's like I have convinced myself, as again, we kind of have to do. We both talked about this. We're like, we kind of have no choice but to convince ourselves that this could work. Because if you fully believe this is not going to work, well, then just don't even watch the games, because what's the point? Sometimes you gotta just convince yourself and be a little bit delusional. And so, I'm thinking about it the last couple of days, and I'm like, this is the best superstar he's ever had. This is the best, or the most functional team he's had in probably 15 years, and basically since he won the title.
Yeah.
He's going to bring us stability. He's going to bring us experience. And it's like, maybe he can make this work. The guys he choked with in the playoffs before weren't exactly superstar. I mean, so they were superstars, but they weren't exactly the most clutch, best playoff performing players. Kawhi is the only exception, but that whole year, like Kawhi and Paul George kind of had injury stuff too, that in the bubble, like that, and it was the bubble too. So that kind of threw things off. Other than that, it's been Embiid, Harden, CP3, Blake Griffin. Like, this is not a list of known playoff performers. So it might not all be Doc's fault. And I'm not going to sit here and say none of it's his fault and that he's completely immune to all this. And, he's a great playoff coach. No, but there's a path to this being, okay, get him some better players, get him some playoff players. We have 3 guys in our starting lineup that have won a title recently and are proven in the playoffs, plus Damian Lillard. So it's like, you give him that team, and I think there's probably a better chance that they're able to close a series up 3-2 than they did when they had Harden and Embiid, or when he had CP3 and Griffin. It just feels like, okay, these are guys you can trust a little bit more. So that could change things. But give me your thoughts on Doc Rivers when you first heard the news that he was a candidate, and then after looking at things for a couple of days.
Pretty much, all the same. But going back to summer when we heard, I was really against it because of how we talked about choking in the playoffs and stuff like that. And I just hadn't been a big Doc fan, and also part of that was probably him coaching the Sixers the last few years, and not liking the Sixers. But as you were saying, as we were talking about, like some of his best teams were CP3, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan as a big 3. Like You look back and yeah, Blake Griffin put up good stats, but he was a guy that scored around the rim, dunked a lot. He was kind of like a Aaron Gordon on steroids in a way, kind of type player. A little bit better. Um, CP3 hasn't won a chip, and then DeAndre Jordan, who's kind of just a 6 foot guy, and then and then his Sixer team, the whole Ben Simmons saga, Harden coming in, Harden folding in the playoffs, Embiid not being good in the playoffs. So it's like he hasn't had good guys. He hasn't had closers, clutch guys, whatever you want to say. And I think that's the one difference too with our team is, you know, especially with how good our starting unit has been. And I really trust it. And I know we've talked about that quite a bit. Um, I think that can be the difference too with him as the coach, especially as I think in a lot of games where like we didn't look good or we lost, whatever, like we just got outplayed, and part of that I think was because of coaching and schemes. But there's a lot of times where, at the end of games, we actually, can either close out or capitalize or make a little run because we have guys that can close out these games. So I think it's different because now he has guys that are, a few proven winners and a guy like Dame that's, a fourth quarter guy. So it's a different realm for him.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And I would say as far as going like looking back on Griffin, I don't wanna sound like, I don't wanna be too completely critical of him as a guy. Like he was a good dude. I wanna give a little bit of respect to him because it's like he was a nice dude, obviously. He was someone who came in and it seemed like when things were going wrong, he was at least trying to fix them, trying to work with the players, trying to listen to those guys. He just was in a situation he was not ready for.
Yeah.
And it's like I can't necessarily blame him for that. Like he didn't hire himself. It's like he again, they had that moment at the beginning of the year where they wanted to go back to the draft coverage and he listened to the guys, did that. They had the moment reported on at the beginning of the year where they were, guys were frustrated and he kind of met with Dame, Giannis, and Brooke and Chris and was like, okay, what do you guys want? What do you need? Like let's talk through this. Again, I think he handled things very well. I think he did everything he could. Again, he just was not ready for this and ultimately was not able to pull the right strings, was not able to make the right decisions, do the right things to be a successful coach. And again, I think they just recognized that, said, hey, we got to move on. It's not the right fit. But if, and that's the other thing is some people have commented about it. His original team that he was supposed to coach was not this team. They were supposed to have Drew Holiday. They were not supposed to have Damian Lillard. I don't think the expectation level should have been expected to be different. Like I don't
Yeah.
there was reports coming out that they weren't expecting to be a contender and that's why they were comfortable hiring a rookie head coach. That makes no sense to me. Like that was reported on by like Chris Haynes and I'm like that makes no sense to me. That sounds like to me that's just excuses as to why it didn't work out. Um but it's like this was always going to be a contending team, but I will give him the slack of, his defense probably would have worked better if it had Drew Holiday instead of Damian Lillard, the aggressive type of defense and stuff like that. And so, all of a sudden you get Dame and it's just not quite fitting and it's not the right scheme and it's not the right, fit, which again isn't necessarily his fault. So, I don't know. I don't want to criticize him too much. It just was not the right team for him. It was not the right fit. He was not ready for this, and it was just time to move on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Doc here. I definitely think there's optimism. I mean, I don't know how you can like it was ugly enough that you're like, okay, well, any type of change could be good. I don't see this. They're going to win a ton of games. I don't see them looking a lot worse than they have looked so far this season. Just given the
Yeah.
talent level, like you have such a high floor with that talent level. Um, it's not going to look really, really bad all the time or anything. So Doc should help. Again, he should provide some stability, run the pick and roll more, and just give this team a higher floor. You're just going to have to then rely on the talent to kind of get you over the top at the end because I don't trust that Doc will be able to do it consistently in the playoffs. And the one thing I also want to say is that this team still needs a trade. I don't want this to, you know, I don't want this to be something that happens instead of a trade. I think that they still very much need a bench defender. Their fifth through ninth guys are really, really bad defensively. And you mentioned it. The starting lineup's been really good. That's one of the reasons I'm still high on this team because their best players are really, really, really good. I
Yeah.
mean, the Giannis Dame, Chris Brook lineups have a 99th percentile offense, an 88th percentile defense, 99th percentile net rating. Like those lineups have been really good. It's just when the bench comes in, the defense starts to collapse, things kind of start to unravel, and it kind of makes the whole team look bad. But then you look back on it and you're like, well, they were pretty good at the start of the game. They got out to a decent start. They were pretty good to start the second half. They were pretty good at the end of the game. They were good at the end of the game to close it out. And it's like, well, those are the moments that the starters all played together. That's why they looked good in all those moments.
Yeah.
Um, and again, come playoff time, the starters play more, the bench plays a little bit less, the rotation gets shortened, all that stuff. So they will look better, I think, no matter what. I think they will look better come playoff time because there will be less bench guys playing than there are in the middle of the regular season.
What's the trade? Who I know there's been a lot of talks of Pat.
Yeah,
It's tough
let's
because
talk
it's
about
kind of
this.
like it's the campaigns, the um Pat, and then potentially Brooks got thrown out there. I don't think they'll trade Brook,
Yeah,
unless they
I
really
mean,
needed
I
to.
I was looking at stuff. And again, with how good that top four has been on the court together, they're not trading Brook. And when you look at the defensive rating with Giannis on without Brook, it's really bad. And when you look at Giannis and Brook both on the court, it's a lot better. So I'm like, they're not gonna go with Giannis as the full-time center. I don't see them trading Brook for a different center because I just
No.
don't know. Like, there's no other center that's gonna be as good as Brook in this situation. So I just don't. I'm kind of throwing Brook off the board now,
Yeah, I
as far
agree.
as possibility of being traded. If you had to bet, who do you bet they trade? If you had to pick one or two guys, like
You
one
know,
pack.
it's weird because if you asked me like 2 years ago, not that Pat's untouchable. This has kind of been our little joke too with us. Because of some people saying stuff and just with him being a Milwaukee guy, but um, fan favorite, I should say. But it feels like that would kind of have to be like him and campaign. I like the campaign signing when we got him because we kind of needed a backup point guard, but he just proven to be very inconsistent, and he still has flashes where I'm like he could be a solid backup point guard, but um, we can live without him, obviously. I guess it would probably be one of those, and then you probably have to throw in, I guess, Marzion. I'm also somebody who, we've talked about Bobby a lot. I don't want to trade Bobby, but he's a guy that has consistently gone down in the playoffs, and you can't, you know, there's not a stat for what he brings energy wise, obviously, but and that's important, but when a guy drops, 10% from three and 8% from the field, and his, rebound numbers are up, but his points are down to like 9 or 10 a game when he's averaging, 14, 15, it's tough. So it's probably, those four: Bobby, Pat, Cam, and Marjan, I guess. I don't know. And I don't know who you get from that, especially that would help right away.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think Bobby really needs to be at least like they need to be shopping him. They need to be seeing what they can get for him and try to upgrade that and try to get a defensive guy. I'll understand it if they keep him, if they're able to trade, just Pat and Marjan, or Pat and Campaign, or Campaign and Marjan for like a defensive piece. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be some amazing, that you wouldn't be getting a Caruso or anything for that type of price, but you'd be able to possibly get a decent player. And it's like, I can understand if they're saying, we need to keep Bobby. We want to have that big guy off the bench that we can put in for a little bit in the playoffs. Have a little bit of big depth and he can score sometimes. And I don't trust it in the playoffs, but he has some. He has scoring ability, so I can understand it if they want to keep him. I've never, again, I've been saying it for a long time now that I've been one of the trade Bobby people and at least be trying to see what you can get. At the very least, I think they need to be in a position where they can play Bobby less in the playoffs and they can not have to play him as like their sixth man. Because I don't see him surviving, 20 minutes a game in the playoffs. I just don't see it. Um, Playoff teams will find a way to just, completely obliterate him on defense, and his offense just has not proven to be reliable usually in the playoffs. So if I had to bet on who they trade, I have a feeling Marjan's gone. And I mean, I know the rumors were saying Pat and Campaign were the two guys. Like that would be kind of the package deal. I don't know. Again, I can't trust that they're gonna trade Pat either. Like I would guess Pat and Bobby probably stay.
Do we have
Just
first to trade?
we don't have any first, but we do have the Portland second this year, so that'd be an early second, and then our 2027 second.
Somebody said DFS, and I know, yeah, I know people are just kind of throwing out some names, so good names to throw out. But I know supposedly they're asking for 2 first-round picks, so we don't have anything close unless they would take 2 second rounders, and Mitch Brown we can't get.
And so I mean, I know they have like they can do a 3-team trade to try to get some picks to another team, but it just becomes kind of hard
That's
because
true.
so someone says Pat has some value. Like I think Pat has a little bit of value. I think Bobby has a lot more. And I think Bobby, you can get I don't know if I see them trading Pat alone for someone that I know Pat's not giving them much, but he does provide a little bit of reliability in the playoffs because he has been good in the playoffs. He has played with those guys for many years. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't trade Pat for someone that's equally as good as Pat because that or just slightly better because that's to me then a lateral move when you factor in Pat's chemistry with these guys and his ability in the playoffs to hit shots. He's hit a lot of shots in the playoffs. I still would be trying to trade Pat. I'd be looking to see what you can get for him. I just when I look at it, I'm like, man, I think you could get someone for Bobby that is pretty significantly better in the playoffs than Bobby. Like he actually um, can play 20, 25 minutes a game. Good defender, can survive on that end easily. I I just see you getting a little bit more bang for your buck if you trade Bobby. Um, I just think I think it's going to be Marjan and Campaign are probably going to be the two that I'm focused on because I don't know. Again, it's hard for me to believe they'll actually move on from Pat or Bobby because those guys have been such an integral part of this, window here. And so I don't know. I think they'll be hesitant to get rid of those guys, and you might just make a really small move. Marjan in 2 seconds for Quentin Grimes, or campaign for Chris Dunn, something like that. Um, I guess Thibault, they said, he has a no trade clause. And I guess he doesn't like Doc Rivers, so he might veto a trade to Milwaukee if it happens now.
I saw somebody throw that in there.
Yeah.
I got 2 trades to throw you away. Tell me what you think. I'm not saying I would or wouldn't do these. They just came to mind. Thibault for Pat straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do that pretty easily.
I'd throw
The only reason I
on a
question,
second.
I know Thibault's great defender, and that's more so what we need. He's turned into a little bit better of a 3-point shooter. We're just curious because of like you said, Pat's got that chemistry he's built.
Yeah. But
You
to
don't
me,
really care about fan favorite, but he's one of those guys.
yeah, to me, like Thibault's that much better than Pat on the defensive end that I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, that's worth it. I'll throw chemistry out the window and I'll just say no, that guy is so much better defensively that I would do it. But yeah,
Okay, I
next
got
one.
another one. Jose Alvarado and Herb Jones. You're not an Alvarado guy?
I love Herb Jones. I love Herb Jones.
For Bobby, Pat, and both seconds.
Yeah, dude, easily.
You would
Not
do
even
that still?
close. Absolutely.
No, I think I agree because I think it takes literally just that much
You could
to
take Marjan
really
too, dude.
do
Take Marjan. I don't care.
it. The
For
only reason
Herb
that
Jones, dude, Herb Jones is incredible. Herb Jones I would do backflips if we got Herb
no,
Jones.
I totally agree. He's an outstanding defender. He's one of those guys that just doesn't get talked about enough because he doesn't get the minutes and he's, overshadowed on the Pelicans, whatever. But you're trading 2 guys that have been around and have been really solid.
Preston
John
says, I
Jenkins on
think
the
John
block.
Jenkins is on the block.
So no, I mean I agree. I love Alvarado. He's another little scrappy defender that, he'd be an upgrade from Campaign. And then you're getting Herb Jones, who's a, honestly should be or could be a, NBA all NBA first team defender. So
To me, I don't see like the three that I'm like, those are dream scenarios that I just don't see being realistic or like I don't expect this to happen. They could. Maybe Horace works some magic. I didn't see Dame as being realistic either. So the three that I think are dream scenarios are Caruso, Herb Jones, and Bruce Brown. Those are the three. You could maybe throw like Finney Smith maybe, but I've kind of been out on Finney Smith a little bit. Like he hasn't been as impressive to me this season. So I was very in on him earlier in the year. I still like him. I'd be happy if they got him, but I don't know. They also could get like a Roy. I could see Pat in seconds for Royce O'Neal. That could be another one. So, but those three guys that I mentioned were like I think are a little unrealistic. The realistic ones I like are Grimes, Thibault, who I'm not sure if that's realistic anymore. I really like Chris Dunn. Um, I think those were mainly the guys that I like, and then Royce O'Neal and Finney Smith. But like that's kind of I don't really see Caruso like where they're not getting Caruso. You'd have to bring in a third team, and either way, I just don't see it happening. They're going to ask too much for him if they trade him,
Yeah, there's
and
a lot of teams that would
so,
give up more.
yeah, those ones I and same with again Bruce Brown. I don't see us having the type of assets to get him. And who was the other one I just mentioned? Russo, Bruce Brown,
You say
and
were you talking O'Neal, Grimes, Herb Jones?
oh, Herb Jones was the one. I like Herb Jones. Maybe I don't know how Horse would pull it off, but that would again I would do backflips, dude. I would
That's the thing.
be
I know someone said they wouldn't trade her for those players, which I'd if I'm the Pelicans, I wouldn't either. But if if you're talking from our perspective, hey, look, you get Bobby, who, they know the energy he brings. He's a big, he's tough down low. He can shoot the ball. You get Pat, who's kind of been a proven, somewhat playoff guy that can play 15, 20 minutes. So maybe they value that. And if you get a third team in there, maybe they get a pick or something back. Like,
Pat can shoot. I mean, and even when he's hasn't been great for us this year, but like he's shooting the ball pretty well. I think he's around 40%. Even lately, he's been better than that. I think
mhm,
in the last few games. Like Pat can shoot. I mean, I'm not gonna act like Pat has no value. He's someone that I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if other teams will value him much more than we would value him in the
yeah.
playoffs, you know. Whereas again, I don't think we have much value for Bobby. I don't think Bobby has much value for us in the playoffs. I really don't. I could be wrong on that, but I don't see it. And I'm like, you could get someone to me that has a lot more playoff value than Bobby. Some people mentioned DeJounte Murray.
It's just a guy where it's another thing where maybe if they got like a third team involved, but I also just I'm iffy on that fit. Um,
I know it's very interesting, but I don't know if I like it or not. Are you
yeah,
there?
I don't know I don't know
Okay.
enough about how good he is off ball,
He's
shooting
so
wise.
Yeah, he's a solid shooter. Like I think on catch and shoot and pull-ups, he's around 38, 39%. Like he's a pretty good shooter. Um, but it's one where like if that happened, if all of a sudden we got a notification that they got DeJounte Murray, I'd be like intrigued. Like, okay, but I'd also not be like, this is the missing piece, this is everything we need. It would be like, I want to wait and see. But it would be like intriguing to have another scorer and a young guy that the thing I'd like most about DeJounte Murray is his fit with Giannis's timeline.
Yeah,
Because then at some point, if you're like, we got to move on from Chris, you've got that scorer that you can, rely on going, after Chris is gone, you've got a guy that you can rely on for a few years as
mhm,
a, 20-ish point per game scorer. That would be my favorite thing about the DeJounte deal. I just don't know, like on this current team, I don't know how great he fits. I don't completely buy into the defense. It was good earlier in his career, but I'm just not totally sure if he's a very good defender. And the other thing is there's only one ball. That
yeah.
would give you Dame, Giannis, Chris, and DeJounte Murray that are all guys that, want the ball in their hands. And again, it could end up not being anything that helps you too much. So those are our thoughts on the Bucks right now. And now before we head out of here, we are gonna do some NBA power rankings. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So I'm gonna pull this up on the screen here and we will get started. Give me your first or 10th, I guess.
10th team, yeah.
We're doing top 10.
Can I do a two-way tie for 10? No,
Uh
I'll do an honorable mention.
Fine.
My honorable mention is the Cleveland Cavaliers because of how they've been playing. But I I just don't fully see it as a top 10 teams with these other teams.
They
Um,
have been hot,
yeah,
but
they have. But
last night not so hot because we
yeah.
killed them.
Number 10 for me, I got the Pelicans. I like their overall play. I know they haven't been great. They're very inconsistent. But I love their roster. They're one of those teams that just have, possibly one too many guys. So yeah, this is our
Yeah,
problem for us though.
they're gonna need to do some consolidating, I think. That's why they're looking to move Herb Jones is like they're just like we have so many guys that are just like good players, but you can't really make room for all of them. They've been really good lately. They're second in net rating over the last 15 games, and they are pretty balanced. Like I think they're kind of good on both sides. It'll obviously it's going to come down to Zion, how good he looks, how healthy he is. That will determine their ceiling. But just, I mean, overall, they've been very solid. They've been, I wouldn't even say surprising. This is about where I think this is a pretty realistic spot to expect them to be. But it's been nice to see them have a nice little run here and be one of the better teams over, the last month ish. My number 10 is a team that is kind of moving up people's power rankings is the Phoenix Suns. Starting to, they've gotten a few games with their big three together, starting to look a little bit better.
Mhm.
And, I think that you're starting to see what that big three could look like. And they're now 8-2 in their last 10 games, sixth in net rating over the last 15 games. So, it's definitely things are moving up for them. I think that they're starting to click a little bit, and so I have moved them into my top 10. Whereas if we did this 2 weeks ago, I'd probably have them 15.
Mhm. Um, Number 9 for me, team we were talking about a little before we started this podcast is the New York Knicks. Um, I did like that trade for them. I still feel like they're, probably a guy or two short on the bench. They don't scare me a ton, and I think Julius Randle brings them down a couple notches as a team, but they're still a very solid team that can beat pretty much any team on any night. I know you got a couple stats on them with good teams versus bad teams, but
Yeah, I also have them 9. I think that's a pretty good spot to have them. I mean, again, they've been playing really well. I like that trade for them to get OG Anunoby. But yeah, they do feel like a team they're clearly better than the bottom half of the league, and I just don't know that they're on the level of the elite teams. Like I just don't see them on that level. They're just like that kind of third tier of teams that you're like, I'm not picking them to win much, but I think they could, give a team a scare. And I think they're a lot better than the teams that are near the play in. I think that they should be able to handle those type of teams. They are 8-7 against teams above 500 and 20-0 against teams below 500, which is pretty remarkable. Like again, I think they're a team that's just like they've got so many good players that they're always going to be better than those bottom feeding teams and those bottom half teams. But I don't think they have the stars. Brenson's really good, but like your top 3 does not compete with the top 3 of a lot of these teams,
yeah.
at the top of these standings. So still, I think they're a good team. I think that it's a pretty exciting little stretch here for them, and I like OG Anunoby. So we both have them 9, and then I'll just say I have the Pelicans 8, who you had 10. I have them 8 because of how good they've looked over the last 15-ish games. So,
I like it.
who is your 8?
My 8 is the Phoenix Suns. I want to ask real quick, do you have an opinion on Dyson Daniels?
I haven't watched him enough this year. I have him on my fantasy team, so I like him, and I liked him during the draft.
Yeah.
I know he's shown some flashes. Has he been playing a lot?
I mean, I know they've, been kind of had the injury bug. They have so many freaking guys. He just another one of those guys where it's like, I think that's why they look to trade a guy like Herb Jones because it's like, hey, we got Daniels who we could release. He's a really good playmaker. I was just curious because I'm a big Dyson Daniels fan. He's been up and down with his minutes. He's probably around 18, 20 minutes a game, but there's nights where he plays probably 10 to 12. So I just want to ask. But yeah, guy to keep your eye on if you're watching Pelicans basketball. Um, yeah, Suns at 8. Kind of like you said, I have them a little higher just because their bench, obviously don't have much going for them on the bench. But when they have Beal healthy, Booker healthy, Durant healthy, they've started to look a lot better.
Yeah,
I
their
think
bench and their defense is the two things that they've got to kind of figure
yeah,
out.
yeah, and I think some of that will come. Obviously as they continue to play together. Katie's looked awesome. Booker's really turned into a better playmaker and kind of more of a point guard. I think he's at almost like 8 assists a game. So it's just one of those teams where you don't want to have to play him, 7 games because they can easily take you down with how the NBA is nowadays in the offense.
Grayson's shooting has been really, really good too. He's at
Yeah,
like 48, 49%. I am very happy we got Malik Beasley, because if we didn't get Malik Beasley to replace him, people would be all up in arms about, like, I mean, our shooting would probably be quite a bit worse, and people would be talking about, should we have gotten rid of Grayson, or was it a mistake to get rid of Grayson Allen? And it's like, we're fine. We got Malik Beasley. He's been basically just as good
yeah,
as at shooting the ball. And again, I like Beasley more for the playoffs, because he's a little bit more of a dynamic shooter. He's not someone who, needs a ton of time, and, needs it off the catch, and in the right spots. And it's like, I feel like Beasley can kind of just get his shot off easier. I think he can a little bit better on the drive. And, neither one of them's a very good defender. I think they both give effort. But I don't know. I'm not mad about giving up Grayson. It's interesting to see him, how good he's been shooting.
yeah.
So my number 7 is, this might be low. I don't know. You might get mad at me for this. The Timberwolves.
No, I'm not mad.
Because look, I've had a gripe with how people have talked about the Bucks versus the Timberwolves this year, because I feel like most people are like, the Timberwolves might be legit contenders, and that defense is amazing and all that. And with the Bucks, it's all, yeah, the Bucks aren't contenders. Their defense sucks. The Bucks are 20th on defense. The Timberwolves are, I think, 19th right now on offense. And it's like, everyone has this, the Bucks are 20th in defense, so they're not contenders. They can't win the title. And yet the Timberwolves are basically 20th on offense, and nobody really talks about them. They can't win the title because of their offense. It's just, I find that interesting. And for me, if you're gonna be really good at one of these two things in the NBA in 2024, I'd rather have the good offense that I know I can keep up with any team. I know I can, even if we're not getting stops, like, our offense will keep us in games. I don't trust that your defense will consistently be able to stop offenses in this league, with the way officiating is, with the way, offenses work now. And just teams getting red hot from three. I don't, and I just haven't been impressed with them very much lately. Like, I don't. Tonight they barely beat the Nets, and their offense is struggling to hit 95 points, and it's just like, it just looks clunky on offense. I think that they might need to try to trade for some offense. Um, their defense is awesome, no doubt, and I really like, the Edwards, McDaniels, Gobert. Like, I love that defense. I love it's really
Yeah.
nice. But there's still just stuff that I'm like, I'm not gonna buy into them completely. I think that their offense is holding them back the way the Bucks defense is holding us back.
We saw it the other night with Anthony Towns' big night, and, Bill Simmons was talking about it on his pod where it's just like, it feels so different. Some of it feels forced. Edwards was totally taken out of that game.
Well, I mean,
Um,
are we gonna, like, does anyone want to talk about how Edwards is like the least efficient high volume mid range shooter in the league? Like, he has not been good on mid range shots. Like, I look, I'm not even trying to be a hater, because I love Anthony Edwards. Like, I just feel like he's this young guy that everyone's, he's the next thing, and it's like, well, let's make sure that he's, playing consistently well on every night before we anoint him like the next big thing. I
yeah.
mean, he's a very good player, but it's just, he has plenty of nights too where it's like 6 points, 9 points, 9 points, 12 point. And I mean, again, I don't mind it if Cat's going off for 62. If you only have 10 points, that's a different thing. But um, I just feel like that he still could take a little bit of a step. He's still not uber consistent, and the mid range shot has not been very good for him. Like, it's just not efficient. So I don't know.
Yeah, it felt like they had more of an identity to start the season. It feels like they've started to lose that a little bit. But I have them at 7 as well.
Okay.
Second one we have the same, and I think obviously we're gonna have the same top 10 team, so that's good. We both know ball.
Who's your six?
Coming in at 6, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. This is a team, again, maybe a little low, but I mean, obviously I'm gonna have us above them, and one other team that might be surprising that I like more than the Sixers.
I feel bad doing this, but this is just based on right now how these teams are playing. Just looking at their body of work so far, and taking into account also like how they're playing lately. But just right now, like, if I'm picking teams in a playoff series, um, I have the Bucks below the Sixers. Now,
So
I'm not saying I'd pick the Sixers over the Bucks, but just with the way the Bucks have been looking, it's they don't look great right now. I'm trying not to be biased. I'm trying to be realistic about the Bucks. As of right now, I don't think I'll put him in the top 5. And Philly, as flawed as I think they are, and I come playoff time, I think the Bucks will be ready to beat them and will beat them. Um, but they are, they're third in the net or in net rating. Um, they're a pretty balanced team. They've been good on both ends. Embiid is having a ridiculous season. Maxi's having a really good season. I just think they've been more consistent than the Bucks. I think that they've just looked better on the defensive side and been more balanced than the Bucks. So I'm putting them above them. I think they've earned the ability to be above the Bucks right now. Now again, that doesn't mean that they'll be there at the end of the year, but as of right now, I'll put them above them. A couple things with them. They are kind of that, again, similar to, as I said, with the Knicks. I mean, they're 20-3 against teams below 500 and only 9-11 against teams above 500. And I don't know how many of those were with or without Embiid, but still, it
Mhm.
doesn't seem like it seems like a lot of the domination they've done and a reason that they're so high in the net rating and they've had so many blowout wins. They're doing it against, like, they seem to dominate the bad teams and then not quite be able to beat the good teams. And so that's something to keep an eye on. They've had a couple good wins, like they beat Minnesota, but it's just like I'm not totally sold on them as this bona fide contender until they start, really playing better against the good teams. So I do have them at 6. Is 5 the Bucks for you?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and one more thing on the Sixers is it just feels like, their one trade that they kinda need feels like it's more of like a bigger need for them. They kinda need another scorer, like a lot of people talk about, whereas we, looking more for a defender. So I guess it depends what you think is more important, but it just feels like their needs are a little bit stronger, even though, yes, they've probably been a little more consistent. If you put us against them right now in a series, now obviously we just had a coaching change, so it's a little different, but I still trust our guys, surprisingly.
Yeah. I maybe I should put them. Maybe I
But
should put them
it's a
above them.
toss up. I mean, like you said,
Whatever.
I think they've
Again,
earned it.
yeah, I was gonna say I'll still leave the Sixers at I forgot to put it in here, but I'll still leave the Sixers at 5 because again I think they have earned it. We have not earned it. Like I'll give them that spot. I do think, yeah, as you said, they need another score because Embiid's usage rate is ridiculously high, and like that's good. Like I'm not saying that it's wrong to give Embiid the ball a lot, but that usually doesn't win you the last game of the year. That usually isn't going to be the thing that wins you in the long run. Is just relying on him doing everything for you and everything going through him. So I think they need another scorer. If they just have Embiid and Maxey as their main scorers, I know Tobias can have games here and there, but if they just have Embiid and Maxey as their main scorers, I think they're definitely beatable because it just seems like if you can take away Embiid a little bit, as I think the Bucks could, the Bucks have 2 guys that I think can defend Embiid pretty well. If you can limit him, I think you'd be able to outscore that team. I think that um, they don't have enough firepower outside of him to make up for it. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Again, that's what's so nice about having Dame now is like you have Dame, you have Chris. That is like if you're able to limit Giannis, you've got another guy in Dame that um, you know we've seen him average 30 in this league. You've seen Chris average 22 in this league. So that's one of the advantages the Bucks have. But I'll move on to my number 4 is the Denver Nuggets.
Really?
Yes. Why is that surprising?
Wow, that's
Dude, they
surprising to me.
I honestly could have put them lower because they really have not. I think people. I mean, we're putting them this high just based on they're the Nuggets. They won the finals. Who they don't really care about the regular season. But like, I mean, if we're trying to rank teams based on like how they're looking and like taking into account how they've looked lately and blah blah blah, like they have to be a little bit lower because I mean they got blown out by 30 tonight. They are
Who they played tonight? I didn't even
the
see.
Knicks. The Knicks. They are another team where 19-3 against below 500 teams and 12-12 against above 500 teams, and they're just 8th in net rating, barely above the Bucks. Like I don't know, they also have not been very impressive. And again, I know it's the easy thing to just chalk it up to well they're not trying as hard. They don't care. And I do believe that that's somewhat the case. I think they'll be better in the playoffs. But and Jamal Murray missed some time, yada yada. I'm not going to put them above any of the three teams that I have above them right now because those teams are just playing a lot better. So yeah,
I guess I shouldn't make that much of a thing because I don't have them much different. I'll say that. I have a team absolutely love at 4 though, the Oklahoma City Thunder. I did give the Nuggets the nod, because of the stuff you said. But like you said, I guess, you know, I haven't watched them enough either. I know they haven't been as great or as consistent, but I still kind of trust them. But that's something to watch. Man, I love watching the Thunder play. If you would have asked people 2 years if you thought they'd be a top 5 team right now, a lot would say no, even though I think we kind of liked, what they're building, their draft picks and whatnot, but they look like a really good freaking team.
yeah,
They
and
are a really good team.
I have them third right now. And yeah, I mean, they're really good on both ends. Obviously, Shea is amazing. They've got, I mean, everything except for, I think they just need another big. That's kind of their struggle right now. But like, yeah, they've done it against good teams. They've kind of just proven that like they are legit. Like this is not just some young, fun team that's like pretty good, like kind of like the Pacers are right now, where you're like, yeah, they're good, they're fun, but like and the Kings last year. But you're like, I don't trust them to win playoff series. Like, this team can win playoff series. This team could possibly make the finals, like legitimately. So, um, yeah, they've been awesome to see them, grow and all of a sudden become this contender. And so I have them at 3 and now give me your
And
number
then
3.
my third was a Nugget, so I wasn't trying to overreact, but I definitely thought you had them at 2 or maybe 3.
Yeah.
So,
No, I just think the Thunder and, I'm guessing we both have the same number 2, the Clippers.
mhm,
Yeah. Like those 2 teams just have been playing a lot better to me consistently that I'm like, not that I would believe in those teams more than the Nuggets come playoff time, but they've been playing that much better that I'll give them the nod right now. It's kind of like that Buck Sixers thing where they've earned that spot. So yeah, Clippers are, they've been on a tear. They've been really good basically since um, Harden came and they had that little skid, but then they turned it on and they've been arguably the best team in the league since then. So they I've been very impressed with them. It'll be interesting to see how it all works, and how it continues to the playoffs because we know how hard it is in the playoffs. We don't know how that all come together, but for right now, it's working really well.
yeah, ditto for all the things you've said, and it just feels like they're just, really clicking, they just have the pieces. I was watching their game the other night, just feels like they just move the ball so well, um, and they're doing enough where it's like everyone's kinda giving up a little piece, of when they say like, "Oh, you got the big 3, someone's gotta give something up." It almost feels like everybody's just giving up like a small step, but everybody's still thriving within the offense, so
Yeah.
it's a tough team and, they got a lot of length on defense, so they're gonna be a very tough team to beat.
Yep. And so then we both have the same number 1, the Sacramento King. No, I'm just kidding. The Celtics are number 1 right now. As much as we hate them, I think you got to put them number 1. They've got the best record by a decent margin, and they're just a really, really good team on both ends. Number 2 offense right now, number 2 defense right now, and um, they've the only big issue you have with them, I guess there's a couple. Like the bench isn't great, kind of like the Bucks, where they're top heavy. They're good for their starting 5, and then once the bench comes in, it kind of falls off. But I don't see that as a huge problem for the playoffs. You only need to play 7 guys in the playoffs.
Mhm.
And then the late game offense. They are a team that relies quite a bit on, you know, I feel like threes and it's like they're not a great they're not always a great mid-range and like isolation type of team. They can, Tatum and Brown can do that sometimes, but just not consistently. And it feels like when the game slows down and it gets to the last 5 minutes and it's a close game and you need some buckets, there's not always a great direction for them. And it's Tatum and Brown settling for jumpers or Porzingis taking jumpers. And I don't know. I feel like they're not able to get to the rim as much. So it just doesn't feel like they have a reliable, um, you know, playoff late game type of offense. I don't trust
Yeah.
Missoula. So they definitely have their flaws. Like there are some clear areas where you could beat this team, but as far as just who's playing the best, how they've looked, like this team right now should be the favorite with how good they look.
Yeah, and if there's one other thing to add is that I know you agree on is just their bench. Like obviously they got, the best starting five when they're all healthy. But if you can kind of contain that starting five and you get, to their bench, it's like Peyton Pritchard, who's undersized, Al Horford, who's getting pretty old, very old in terms of NBA. Sam Hauser, who's like, he shot the ball very well, but he's not a guy that's gonna kill you, unless he's, you're just letting him chuck up a bunch of threes, he's hitting his shots. Um, and then they got the Luke Cornets of the world, stuff like that. I mean, I don't even know then who kind of fills out their 9-10, but um, so like you said, they got their flaws like every team, and they've looked really crisp and their starters are great. But yeah, if you can contain those guys and let them chuck up those threes and just hope that, they don't fall, at the percentages that they have been for them, then you're going to be looking good.
Yeah, and as far as a Bucks Celtics type of matchup, like I firmly believe that our top four is better than their top four. Giannis, Dame, Chris, and Brooke, I think is better than their top four. But it's the fifth through like seventh that they are definitely better there. And their number five is definitely better than our number five. I think that the start of their bench is better than the start of our bench, or at least for a playoff series it is. I think that, again, we have no defense off the bench. So it's like if you can bridge that gap and close that gap a little bit from that fifth through seventh spots with a trade, then I think you've got a decent chance to beat this team because if it can improve the defense a little bit and you can kind of match their starting five with your starting five or possibly be even better, that helps. And having the best player in the series by a decent margin, I think helps too.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, and I'm not saying Tatum's a very good player, but one of the reasons I believe the Bucks can beat that team in a playoff series is because Tatum is their best player. Like he's not the type of superstar, as good as he is. He's not the type of superstar like a Giannis, like a Jokic. He's just not that guy. So I think he's very good. I think he can have big games, but you trust Giannis a lot more than a guy like that. And I think that sometimes when in a series that close, it comes down to who has the best player. So
Yeah.
um, yeah. So that is our Bucks NBA or our NBA power rankings and our Bucks talk. So we'll have plenty of more stuff to talk about as we near the trade deadline. We can talk about more trades and stuff as that approaches and how the Bucks look in their first few games with Doc Rivers. Not sure if he'll be coaching tomorrow.
What's your guess?
I would. They haven't announced it yet. I think what I'm going to guess that they announce it tomorrow and he's coaching tomorrow. I don't know. I just have a feeling.
It feels like he will. Obviously, they're not going to have pretty much probably like anything in place. He's going to rely on the assistants a lot.
Yeah.
But it feels like that. It was also weird because it came out kind of the night before, but it wasn't official, so like it was less time. But shout out to Joe Prunty for getting us that big dub against the Cavs.
Prunty is he's a coach of the year candidate. I feel like he has to be. He has not trailed this season.
No, he hasn't. He's he's been a great coach for the Bucks when he's been around, and he's just a good guy, great guys. I think a lot of people saw in the post game. He's a really nice and genuine guy. So I was glad that when he gets his slight chance like that, and you could tell he was vocal with the guys, and I think guys feed off that type of thing. So it was cool to see.
He was cussing out the ref at one point. I don't know if you ended up seeing that. He was cussing
Kinda.
out the ref. And they showed it on TV. And it was so funny. Everyone was like laughing at it on Twitter. But yeah, I agree. He brings some good vibes. And again, I'm excited to see how they look with Doc. I don't expect them to be completely changed in one game with Doc. It's going to take some time. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, as I said, we're going to have a lot of Buck stuff to talk about as this season ramps up and we get to the second half. And so we will have some more episodes out for you guys. But thank you for tuning in as always. And go Bucks.